So this opening music here is almost literally an Easter egg. This music is an Easter egg because it was the favorite song, apparently, or a favorite song, perhaps, of Pope Francis, who died actually the day after Easter. We're not talking today so much about Pope Francis as we are about conclaves, one of which there is about to be. Does that make any sense? That's scanned grammatically. Anyway, we're going to have a papal conclave, and that made us think about the movie released last year, and that would be the movie called Conclave. We're going to talk about that today. A little bit later, we'll talk about MobLand, which actually has some similarities to Conclave. MobLand is a series, I think on Paramount Plus, with Pierce Brosnan and Helen Mirren and a cast of thousands. We'll come to that. All right, but right now we're going to talk about Conclave. To do that, I have elevated 3 nose panelists in pectore to the rank of Cardinal. Taneisha Cardinal Duggan is associate producer at Octopus Theatricals. Lindsay Lee Cardinal Wallace writes about culture, healthcare, and health equity and other stuff. And Bill Cardinal Usman is professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. They are all with us and all ready to talk about Conclave. I should maybe set the stage by saying that Conclave takes place, obviously, after the death of a pope. There is sort of a Michael Clayton kind of figure in the person of Cardinal Lawrence, played by Ralph Fiennes, who's just trying to keep things together, just kind of get to some result. There are competing agendas, starting with a very traditionalist, retrogressive cardinal, and kind of devolving from there into a wily American cardinal, and a bunch of other surprises as well. I'm not doing a very good job of summarizing this, so let's get right into it. Before we bring the panel in, let's hear a little clip. You're going to hear Stanley Tucci as Aldo Cardinal Bellini, and Ralph Fiennes as the aforementioned Lawrence. Here we go, A1.
If Tedesco becomes Pope, he will undo 60 years of progress.
You talk as if you're the only alternative, but Adeyemi has the wind behind him.
Adeyemi? Mm-hmm. Adeyemi, the man who believes that homosexuals should be sent to prison in this world and hell in the next. Adeyemi's not the answer to anything, and you know it. If you want to defeat Tedesco...
This is a conclave, Aldo. It's not a war.
It is a war, and you have to commit to a side. Save your precious doubts for your prayers.
You can't seriously believe that I have the slightest desire to become Pope.
Come on! Every cardinal has that desire. Every cardinal deep down has already chosen the name by which he would like his papacy to be known.
Well, I haven't.
Deny it if you like. But search your heart, and then tell me it isn't so.
And right after that, Stanley Tucci's Cardinal Bellini makes everybody a beautiful meal, and they just have a wonderful time together. No, not really. So let's get the panel going on this, and let's start with Taneisha Cardinal Duggan. First of all, I think a lot of us had the experience of watching this a few months ago, around the time that it came out, and then rewatching it to get ready for this. I think, Taneisha, that included you. Talk a little bit about your progression, if that's the right word, on this particular intellectual property.
For sure. So when I first saw it sort of, I wasn't doing the sort of full round of prep for the Oscars, but sort of like trying to pay attention and know what would be in the conversation. So I watched it, and I am one who often can see the ending of a work before the ending comes. And I could see the ending of this work before the ending came. And at the time, I will reveal no spoilers, but was sort of eye-rolled about it and kind of felt like, well, yes, I saw that from the very moment of introduction. And, here they go again with their agenda, those Hollywood movie types. And on reflection in this moment, as we go into a conclave, which I think, because I had such cynical feelings about it when I was on the show, alluding to it, I called it Conclave. As I think about Conclave, it sits with me much better now. And I think that there is conversation about war. And does it actually have to be war for us to actually have a conversation about our different ideologies and come to a way forward? I'm a lot warmer to it on second viewing in this time than I was the first time I saw it.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I'm 100% with you all the way through there. I mean, I didn't see the surprise, but other than that, I'm with you. I do think that part of this, and I probably know a little bit more about conclaves than most people. I actually covered one of them decades and decades ago. But 80% of the cardinals who will attend this conclave, the 2025 conclave, were appointed by Pope Francis. He was chosen in 2013, so he had time to do that. And in December, he created 21 new cardinalships on 6 different continents. So what happens at these conclaves is a lot of people who don't know each other are showing up and getting to know each other. They've got a little bit of time before the doors close to even familiarize themselves with each other. And I think you get a little bit of that in here. You get this core group of people who've been around for a while, but then there are all kinds of wild cards. Anyway, Lindsay Lee Wallace, I know you felt similarly. I think you used the phrase, it hits differently now. Why does it hit differently?
I didn't have as negative an experience the first time that I watched it. I also was like, oh, this unassuming character with the soft voice and the kind face, I wonder what's going to happen with him. But I was like, initially, I thought it was going to be a lot more serious than it was. And then once I adjusted to the fact that it was kind of like a frothy drama, I enjoyed that because I like a frothy drama. But the parts of it that maybe seemed like overly saccharine at the time, like, conversation about like the importance of uncertainty coming from the messenger of the Catholic Church, for example, that at the time I was like, okay, sure, whatever. Now, because of where we are, feels like perhaps I am more open to that kind of earnestness, and it feels more like something we need and more like something that I want people who are taking their cues from the Catholic Church to hear. So it definitely comes across differently now, although I still love a frothy drama, and especially Stanley Tucci in a frothy drama.
I think we all feel that there's some pretty terrific acting being done, and not just by Stanley Tucci. And maybe we can talk about that as we go along. So Bill Huseman, I think this is your first acquaintance with Conclave. So tell us how it went.
Well, first of all, it's Cardinal Huseman to you, please.
Sorry.
And
Eminence. Excuse me. Eminence. If you could tell me how you felt about the movie.
If I have been elevated to that role of Cardinal, I want to point out this will be the first time in history, I believe, that a Jewish person has been made a cardinal.
Well, unless you count the apostles.
Well, we're going to go way back to the beginning.
It is apostolic succession. So technically, Peter is the first pope. He's Jewish.
After me, the deluge.
Yeah.
I loved this movie. And I don't know why it took me so long to get to it, because we usually try to watch all the Best Picture nominees. And we kept saying, well, you want to watch Conclave tonight? And it's like, no, but then we would choose something else. And then we would choose. So it took me until this week to get to it. And I just fell in love with it. I really think it's a really, really excellent film. You talked about the acting. We'll talk more about that. The acting is just supreme. So many actors that I love and admire. Lithgow, Fiennes, Tucci, Rossellini. I mean, it just goes on and on. I love the solemnity of it, which I think is really well underscored by the soundtrack and the costuming and the interior and exterior shots of the magnificent art and architecture of the buildings. I think they do a wonderful job creating that milieu, and I really felt myself pulled into it. And then, of course, all of the intrigue and the political machinations that occur, I just thought unfolded in a way that just kept me captivated from start to finish.
What did you think of the performance? We were talking about acting. What did you think about the performance by the turtle? I thought, the turtle was pretty good.
I want him to come out of his shell a little bit more.
I think that was
he does.
Yes,
in fact.
Let me just sort of talk a little bit about what my problem was the first time around, which I'm with you guys. I think this thing really ages very, very well, and some of the stuff that Tedesco is saying is stuff that is being said all over the globe by people like Trump and Orban and Le Pen and the AfD in Germany. He's just saying, basically the
and Netanyahu
and the far right populist point of view. I do feel as though there's an awful lot of plot here. Not only is there's this kind of huge, thunderbolt for at least some of us at the end, but there's just so many different things going on here. And I found myself thinking of Tom Condon, the late Tom Condon, a Vietnam veteran who, after he saw Deer Hunter, kind of objected to the whole Russian roulette thing in Deer Hunter. And he said, that I was in Vietnam all over the place. That didn't happen. They didn't have to make something up. There was enough stuff to work with, but without sort of reaching for that. And I felt a little bit that way at times, that this film needs to pull so many rabbits out of its hat. There's a terrorism subplot. There's a simony subplot. There's a smear the African
illegitimate child.
Yeah, smear the African cardinal subplot. Taneisha, I found it a little bit of a cluttered movie. It was trying to do so many different things, and maybe part of that is the musical chairs portion of this. You have to get rid of cardinals who are potential popes, and that's how you do it. But I found it a little bit meandering in that way.
I think that's exactly, why on first viewing I had such a hard time. And so often, my view watching these days is so passive. And so, I want to be able to capture as much as I can while doing other things. And it just isn't a movie because and you name it, right? It is precisely because we need to understand and feel why we're cutting cardinals along the way, that some of that plot is indeed necessary, but it does feel it is a movie that needs to be watched with intention or without a lot of distraction. I'll also say, another thing that sort of bugged me, but that I was able to intellectualize on the second watch, is that the compositions actually feel really aggressive to me. They just feel so staged.
When you say composition, make sure we know what you mean.
Yeah, the look of each scene.
Okay, yeah.
Right. The visual sort of design of each scene felt really aggressive to me. I could see it, and oftentimes in movies, even when there is a really artistic, director of photography or cinematographer or director, in fact, that you don't see it or feel it so much. It feels a little seamless. And I felt like I was watching each of the pictures. And I think this time I was able to intellectualize and be like, well, there's this hard and soft thing that's being, theme that's weaving its way through the movie. And we are in the Vatican, and we are in this place that is, very much about old art. And so these hard frames of these photos sort of fits within, the idea of Roman art. And I could sort of talk myself into the choices, but I think you'll notice the shots in this movie. I do. And they're beautiful. Let's be clear. They are stunning.
Well, they do, but you're right. You're sort of saying they at times call attention to themselves in a way that we probably don't want them to do. There is one shot near the end of all these cardinals in their red robes, and they've got these white parasols. And they're kind of just walking, and it's an overhead shot of the white. And I thought, is this the worst Super Bowl halftime show ever? Or, what?
I love that shot. I loved it.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. Kendrick Lamar was watching and going, why didn't I think of that? I could have had Cardinals out there.
That would have been an antebellum story.
Watching that scene, I was just like, God, that must have been exhausting to organize. If they really did just have that many people, that must have just been taken all afternoon.
We should talk about some of the acting here. I mean, I actually think Ray Fiennes is an amazing actor, and here this is tough work. An awful lot of it's face acting, a lot of it's acting done in silence or with saying very few words. But what he does have some words to say, I think he says them very well. Let's hear his little speech about certainty, which I think is the one that a lot of people wind up quoting. Although I don't think it's the most important speech in the movie. But here we go, A2.
Certainty. Certainty is the great enemy of unity. Certainty is the deadly enemy of tolerance. Even Christ was not certain at the end. Dio mio, perché mi hai abbandonato, he cried out in his agony at the 9th hour on the cross. Our faith is a living thing precisely because it walks hand in hand with doubt. If there was only certainty and no doubt, there would be no mystery, and therefore no need for faith. Let us pray that God will grant us a pope who doubts, and let him grant us a pope who sins and asks for forgiveness and who carries on.
That is a speech that he is giving to his fellow cardinals at the outset of the conclave. But Lindsay Lee Wallace, you mentioned Stanley Tucci. I don't know if there's anybody else you want to talk about, whether it's Ray Fiennes or, I mean, obviously the scenery chewing work is probably done by Sergio Castellitto, who plays Cardinal Goffredo Tedesco. But just talk a little bit maybe about whatever kind of acting struck you there.
Well, I also really liked John Lithgow's performance. I am always happy to see him, but I thought that it was very evocative of the type of person who is very, the kind of sneaky person who sneaks up on you because they're so enamored of decorum and generally coming across as trying to have everyone's best interest at heart, but in fact acting very nefariously maybe. And I think that is, as we were saying before, seeing this movie now and recognizing things that feel familiar, that was a type of person that I feel has been able to get a lot of traction in a lot of places. So I really appreciated his performance in that regard. I would be remiss not to mention how disappointed I am in you, John Lithgow. I know you're listening, for your participation in the new Harry Potter series. I think that's lame and loserish of you. However, great job in
Well, his work in The Old Man maybe makes up for the Harry Potter stuff. I don't know. I'm not the judge of these things. I can't judge the hearts of my fellow Cardinals. But yeah, Bill, I don't know. Anything you want to say about these performances that we haven't said so far?
I don't think there's a bad performance in the entire film. I think everybody is really, really excellent, including some of the quieter roles that maybe didn't have as much to chew on. Carlos Diaz as Vincent Benitez, who of course becomes key to everything. Isabella Rossellini, her performance is very quiet. She doesn't get a lot to do or say, but in those moments when she's on screen, she's captivating, as she always is. I think it would have been, each one of these characters is in some ways sort of an archetype, kind of standing in for a particular political perspective or political flaw. And I think it would have been really easy for them to just remain as sort of these cardboard cutouts in those roles. And yet, because of the craft and the people that they cast, each one of them, I think, really comes alive as a fully dimensional person rather than just an archetype or a stereotype or a stand-in for some, kind of larger political point.
So speaking of stand-ins, I know Taneisha wants to talk about this. So Isabella Rossellini as Sister Agnes is basically a stand-in for 50% of the human race, which is often the case.
51%.
It's often the case in Roman Catholic settings. But Taneisha, say a little bit about how you're perceiving all that.
The 50% as in women?
Well, no, I mean, yes, exactly, yes.
Yeah, I mean, as you were talking, Bill, and you were talking about her performance that was quiet, I actually started to think about this smile she does when Benitez first addresses, or maybe seconded, one of his addresses to the Cardinals, and she sort of gives this smile of approval of what he's saying. And in hearing you speak, I was like, I wonder the backstory of this woman. I wonder what she knows, because she seems to know all. And she has this great reveal around Adieme and sort of telling the truth of his story. And so there's something about, the labor of women inside of this work. I think that was really interesting to see the beautiful, pastas being made, and then, seeing the hands that are making it, seeing the care work that happens around the Vatican and who holds that. But also like this sly not as in like a fox, but sly as in quiet, but also useful knowing. That I think her role sort of sits inside of and offers sort of threads and seeds and themes for us to carry once we see the whole film. I will just call back to Stanley, to Cardinal Lawrence's doubt and certainty and faith. And my Catholic girl self, every time I hear that speech, I think, let us proclaim the mystery of faith. And just the proclamation of the mystery of faith in this moment I'm like, religion, you have these moments of beautiful language and understanding that like just hits the heart and is so truthful. Like, we've been through a pandemic, a moment of doubt. We're in the midst of more doubt. Can we proclaim the mystery of faith and sort of walk in the mystery and the faith in this moment? I don't know. I hope so.
Just quickly,
go ahead.
Just really quickly, just about that thing you said, Taneisha, about how Rossellini's character seems to know everything. She's got a great line where she says, although we sisters are supposed to be invisible, God has given us eyes and ears.
Can I just say two things about what Taneisha was saying? One of them is that smile that you talked about. It comes actually when Cardinal Benitez, who is a complete unknown, he's been made a cardinal in pectore by the preceding pope. Nobody even knows that he exists until he shows up. He's the Cardinal of Kabul, and he is asked to give the blessing over the first meal, and he gives kind of the standard blessing, and all of the cardinals get ready to tuck in, and then he keeps going, and he says a few other things, and the last thing he says is something like, bless and thank the sisters who prepared this meal for us. That's when she smiles, because they are so frequently overlooked or written out of the script. But the thing that goes with it, and this is me having maybe in an earlier incarnation, I did cover the Roman Catholic Church. And there's a moment where Stanley Tucci's character, Bellini, is outlining his views. And he says, I think maybe a more common sense approach to gay people and to divorce, and more acceptance of, and he runs through a bunch of things, and some tolerance for different views within the church, and he said, and also an expanded role for women in the curia. And one of the other guys goes, well, maybe not that one. Like, he's run through a whole bunch of things, and they go, okay, that you're going a little bit too far there, expanded role for women in the curia. And that got a laugh out of me, because it felt very real. One of the things that the next pope, no matter who he is not going to do. He's not going to ordain women, and women are going to be exactly. Their role could conceivably improve if they pick the guy from the Philippines, but not that much, because they really do have a problem with all that. All right. Anyway, we got to go on to MobLand. We have to say goodbye very reluctantly, although she's going to come back for endorsements. But to Taneisha Cardinal Duggan, and we'll take a little break, and we'll join the mob after this. That is the theme song to MobLand. We're going to talk about that. MobLand, I believe, is airing on Paramount Plus. It is the story, just to do something different. It's sort of a gangster series. And it's the story of Irish gangsters in particular, headed up by Pierce Brosnan as the paterfamilias of the Harrigan family. Although we should say that it seems, as we go along here, and I'm sure we'll discuss this, that the real power lies with his wife, Maeve, who's kind of a Olivia as in I, Claudius figure. Anyway, a terrific cast. Also Tom Hardy. He is the Michael Clayton of this particular series. Harry D'Souza, the amazing Paddy Considine, Joanne Froggatt, formerly known as Lady Edith in Downton Abbey, now in a very different situation, and many others as well. Reminding you who our panel is, Lindsay Lee Cardinal Wallace, who writes about culture, healthcare, and health equity and other stuff. Bill Cardinal Usman, professor of media studies at Sacred Heart University. And now we're adding a panelist who I was not able to elevate to Cardinal because he didn't participate in the Conclave discussion. So Sean Murray is a layperson and a stand-up comedian, writer, and host of the Nobody Asked Sean podcast. Sean Murray's Read the Room stand-up comedy series celebrates its first anniversary tomorrow night. I believe first anniversary is gold, silver. It's Club Drugs. I think that's what you get on the first anniversary. April 26th at Possible Futures Bookstore in New Haven. Gary Simons is headlining. So we're going to get going on this series, MobLand. Maybe we should start, Sean, with you and with the title, which I don't think you like very much.
You're absolutely right, Colin. And I'm just out of, first of all, I just want to say I'm very disappointed because this is my best chance of ever becoming a Cardinal. So I guess it's never going to happen for me. Just I'm still kind of young.
You're young enough to be drafted by the St. Louis baseball team. So think about it that way.
But I threw out my arm. I got Tommy John surgery a few years ago. And, no, it's very much like we're in this era of like just naming stuff. Like I guess it's not new to call something the blank or whatever, or like a very straightforward title. But MobLand is like a just very uninteresting. Like it sounds like a documentary about a part of the country where there's a bunch of mobsters. Like it doesn't sound like an interesting crime drama. So I was out on it like when I heard of the show before even it being brought up in the context of talking about it for the wonderful Colin McEnroe program. But then you got Tom Hardy, you got Paddy Considine, you got Pierce Brosnan, and like, okay, I'm in. You know what I mean? Now we're talking. I watch pretty much anything Tom Hardy does. I haven't watched it yet, but this is this movie Havoc that he made that they made like 5 years ago and never finished. And they just finished it, and it's on what's the big service? Netflix. And I'm gonna watch that just because it's Tom Hardy and for no other reason.
All right, so let's hear a little bit from the series. One of maybe the driving sort of plot force in this is the disappearance of a young member of one of two rival gangs. We're going to hear from Jeff Bell as Richie Stevenson, Tom Hardy as Harry D'Souza, and Tommy Flanagan as Moody. B1, please.
My boy didn't come home. And I know that he was with Eddie Harrigan last night.
Oh, says who?
Does it matter? Where's Eddie? I need to see Eddie Harrigan. I need to hear from his own mouth, face to face, whether he was with my boy last night.
Oh, come on, Richie, you know that you can't just summon the governor's grandson like that.
If you make things difficult for me, it won't end well for you, Harry. This is about my boy, Moody. Not a kilo of chop or some brass has taken a slap. This is my blood. Now, either I talk with Eddie Harrigan, or there will be a drama.
All right, Reggie. You're emotional, I get that. You just got to simmer in here.
Tell you what I can do, right? I will personally speak to Eddie. And we will get to the bottom of this.
You got till noon tomorrow?
Noon is good.
So you hear the voice of Tom Hardy's Harry, who spends the entire series wiggling a series of pins back into a series of grenades. That's pretty much what his job is. So Lindsay Lee Wallace, tell us a little bit about how this is resonating with you so far.
Well, I would not ordinarily have watched the show, and I agree, Sean, about the name, especially having like two words combined with the second one capitalized. It makes it feel like it's like an outdated piece of technology or like a bad salad chain, which is just really, it does a disservice to what did turn out to be a show that I enjoyed more as it went on. I think that my favorite part definitely is Tom Hardy and watching him be so delicate with the emotions and understanding of the emotions of all of these extremely volatile, dangerous people, and then like go to his own home and just be like, I have absolutely no ability to navigate my relationship with my wife or my daughter, which is, you know, who among us, I guess, has not been a fixer for a major mob, but incapable of managing interpersonal matters. But it's, you know, particularly well played by Tom Hardy, I think. And then sort of on the other hand, I guess, is Maeve, who is so good at managing interpersonal matters that are actually horrible mob matters that it makes my skin crawl watching her like hold her grandson's head against her bosom and be like, "Oh, do you want some cocaine, Sonny?" And it's like, I don't know a lot about England. Maybe that's what's going on over there all the time, but I found that very unsettling.
Well, there's you know, this performance by Helen Mirren as Maeve. For anybody who saw either the movie or the TV series Animal Kingdom, there was this, you know, matriarch played first by Jackie Weaver in the movie, and then by Ellen Barkin in the series, who was very similar, was without scruple, but also very much sexualized her relationship with her sons in Animal Kingdom. I feel like Mirren's character is sexualizing her relationship even with her grandson. You know, there's a lot of kissing on the lips and holding the head to the bosom and all that kind of stuff.
Cookies and cocaine.
Yeah, exactly.
Best grandma ever.
So, Bill, tell us a little bit more about what you're thinking about this.
I feel contractually obligated now to weigh in on the title, and I'm just going to point out that another way to read the title is as Mo Bland. But
Mo Better Bland. By the way,
Yeah.
we should say to Lindsay Lee Wallace, if you haven't tried the street corn salad at MobLand, you are missing out. They do a very nice one there. Anyway, go ahead.
But it's actually not bland at all. It's one of those things that often happens for the nose. I didn't anticipate liking this as much as I did, but the more I watch it, and there's only been 4 episodes so far, and I guess there's like 6 to come. I think I'm going to keep watching it. The more that I see of it, the more invested I am, the more I'm interested in these characters. Again, similar to Conclave, the acting is doing a lot of the work here. It's really carrying it, but there's also some really great scripting. Although I pointed out that these guys are really incredibly erudite and sophisticated and philosophical for a group of mobsters. So you kind of have to suspend your disbelief about that a little bit. But it is.
Look at the mobsters with high degrees running our country. You know, I think that clearly being extremely educated doesn't preclude you from being a violent thug either.
Right.
I think a lot of them have degrees, but not education.
You know, I do want to point out
another story.
I do want to point out that the co-writing of this is Jez Butterworth, one of the English language's greatest living playwrights, and he's also was, I think, co-writer, if not, maybe he and his brother wrote The Agency also this year. And Butterworth writes that way too. I mean, his characters are smart, irrespective of where they come from or what class they inhabit or anything like that. So, I mean, I think that's sort of on brand. And I personally will watch, I will at least give a try to anything that Jez Butterworth is writing. But, you know, Sean, a thing that comes up here, I think, among us too, is there have been an awful lot of series about members of the mafia and movies about members of the mafia and other kinds of gangs as well. I mean, there's just no shortage of them these days. And then the question becomes, is it possible to do something relatively new or special with it? And that's, I think, the burden that a real prestige project like MobLand has. And Sean, maybe you could say a little bit about how you think they answer that bell.
Yeah, one second. I wanted to get to something Bill said real quick, which is I'm actually very frustrated by how often I am tasked with watching something for this show and end up liking it and continuing to watch it. I'm like,
It's annoying, isn't it?
It is, because it makes me realize that my intuition about what I thought would be a good show is completely wrong. I'm like, yeah, this is gonna be terrible, and then it's like, this is actually pretty good. I'm gonna keep watching.
You know, Carolyn Payne has the integrity to hate everything that we make her watch. So you could.
I respect her for it.
You can respect her for that. Anyway, go ahead, keep going.
But yeah, I think it's like, yeah, in the shadow of like The Sopranos, right? It's like, which completely, I mean, not only just changed, obviously changed television, but specifically changed how we look at gangsters and mobsters, and gave it so much more depth and like specificity and nuance, and like it's almost like, well, you can't just stop making mob shows, you know, but it's hard to like live up to that. Not that this show is necessarily trying to live up to Sopranos, but I know they are. You know, like that's, it's kind of like when you're writing this show, you're developing this show, you have that to compare yourself to. And I think how they sort of explore that, or like, you know, get around that pressure is like just making a show you're gonna want to make. And to the point of like how Butterworth writes, right? It's like, it's, you know, Tony Soprano didn't talk like was it Harry? Like they didn't have that level of like, it was a lot more colloquial and like common. So I think it's like exploring it in different ways, but like I don't think they're gonna try to reinvent the mob show. Not that they should, but it's impossible. But then you know, obviously James Gandolfini's performance as Tony Soprano is one of the greats in all of television history. But, and this is not Tom Hardy's performance isn't going to be Tony Soprano level, but he is just at such a level of acting anyway that like that's what one of the show's strengths is. Like the casting is so incredible that it actually papers over some of the like less interesting, like when they don't delve into certain things as deeply. I think like I'll watch these characters all day.
You know, one of the really interesting things that has kind of dawned on me, even as we're having this conversation, Lindsay Lee Wallace, is so The Sopranos, of course, begins with Tony Soprano talking to Dr. Melfi. And that idea of the introduction of the therapist is so persistent now in various kinds of crime dramas, or even something like Ted Lasso, where the whole idea of, you know, talking to a therapist and having things revealed. And I really enjoy that trope. I'm not sick of it. But I would like to point out that in Daredevil Born Again, which Sean actually might possibly have watched, one of the villains is in marital counseling and doesn't show up for some of the appointments. And sometimes it's just his wife. And that happens here. I mean, Lindsay, I love these scenes where, you know, mob guys go to the therapist or go to marriage counseling when in fact they can't talk about anything. That's the whole point.
Yeah, I think I mean, it's, first of all, I feel like you calling me out in this regard is like you're telling me something, you think I need to go to therapy. I'm not quite sure what the implication is. But I think it's funny because like in obviously The Sopranos, when Tony Soprano is going to therapy, it's like this like, you know, a dog walking on its hind legs type thing where it's such a shocking image. And now because that was like set as the exact type of shocking thing that we wanted to see, it's become a trope in and of itself. And so for Tom Hardy to not show up to the couples counseling appointments is sort of like subverting something, even though originally to have Tony Soprano be there was the subversion, which is kind of funny. I think that like it also speaks to like Tom Hardy is playing this character that is, I guess, also kind of an archetype where he seems like so level-headed and almost sweet while committing these atrocities. And that is like, again, that feels very discordant and interesting. Whereas Tony Soprano was like a volatile, mean, like not self-aware person who was also going through immense psychological damage because of what he was doing. And that's why his trauma was interesting to watch play out in therapy. And maybe that's why Tom Hardy can't go to his couples counseling, because he's too regulated. If we saw him in there, he wouldn't break down or he wouldn't even attack his therapist a little bit.
All right. Before Bill Eastman talks about his therapy experiences, we have to go to a break anyway. So all four panelists will have time to endorse in the final segment. So let's do that. Okay, some quick thank yous. First to the technical producer, the maestro, the wizard, Dylan Reyes. This episode was produced, as are almost all Nose episodes, by Jonathan McPants. Thanks also to Robin Doyen-Aiken for getting us through the week, Meg Fitzgerald as well. And there's somebody else that I'm not thinking about. Well, obviously, Lily Tyson Quality Entertainment Productions. All right, time to make some recommendations. Let's have Sean Murray get us started here.
I believe this is the second time I've done this, but I'm gonna recommend a book I haven't even finished yet, but I've been reading recently. John Steinbeck's East of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
So good. It's one of the great books. It's one of those books that's like canonically great, and I'm always just like, that book can't be that good. So I've just skipped it forever. And then I was in Canada and I found like an old like paperback copy at this used bookstore, Paper Birch Books, if you're ever in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And it was like this, back pocket 50-cent copy of the book. I was like, I can't pass this up. I've never seen this cover before. And it's incredible. So, yeah, check that book out. You probably already have because you weren't rebellious about literature like me.
Okay, nobody tell Sean the ending. Don't tell him the ending of Conclave or the ending of East of Eden. All right, so Lindsay Lee Wallace, how about if you go next?
I need to endorse, I don't know if I can endorse a play. I'm doing it. It's happening already. The Picture of Dorian Gray that is on Broadway right now with Sarah Snook is like one of my favorite things that I've ever seen. I know that I'm on the radio, so you don't know this, but I'm wearing a hat from that show that says, I would give my soul for that. That was so expensive for a hat, but I gave my soul for hat because that's how much I like it. So, yeah.
That's a very conclavey kind of endorsement. All right, so we'll just keep going here. And so, Taneisha Duggan, how about making a recommendation?
I would love to. First, Lindsay, I've been on the show with you twice, and both times you've endorsed a play, and I love that as a forever theater maker. Love that for you, and love that for us. And Sean, yes, the gateway to any great book is the cover art. I don't care what anybody says. Fight me on that take.
Absolutely.
We didn't get into it, but we did a show last week about The Great Gatsby, and The Great Gatsby was arguably, it was ignored when it was initially released. It was not a big success, and that really iconic cover was one of the things that I think helped it get into the American conversation. So I have to throw my lot in with all of you.
Interconnected art forms. It's the way to go. And actually, thank you for that segue for my endorsement. I was unable to make it to Fire Shut Up My Bones at Hartford Symphony Orchestra last night, but the scuttlebutt has been so remarkable about that work, about the opera singer, about Carolyn, of course. And they've got a concert coming up, the Princess Bride concert, where they are playing live to the movie May 31st. And so I just like a gem in Hartford Symphony Orchestra, obviously internationally renowned, but like just doing amazing work. And you all should go. Hartford Symphony Orchestra, the Princess Bride in concert. Laugh. There's some great music.
I will say that both the maestro, Dylan Reyes, and I were there last night. And certainly the second act of the thing, which is the operatic part of it, Terence Blanchard himself was there playing with his group, and so this jazz combo was kind of intertwined musically with the Hartford Symphony, and it was musically an incredibly satisfying second half. That this opera is just remarkable, and the two singers that they brought in, the operatic singers, were spectacular as well. So I can
the things I'm hearing.
Yeah, I can add my enthusiasm. I will say that it would have been helped quite a bit if they'd explained the plot to the audience. But other than that, no notes. All right, so we're going to keep going here. Bill Usman, you've got the floor.
Well, just to start, Sean, the 1955 East of Eden film also very much worth seeing after you
check it out.
The novel. But Colin, you kind of set me up nicely for what my endorsement is today, because I'm sticking with Stanley Tucci and Isabella Rossellini, and I want to endorse the 1996 film Big Night, which was co-directed by Campbell Scott and Stanley Tucci. It's set in a restaurant on the Jersey Shore in the 1950s. Tucci co-stars next to Tony Shalhoub as two brothers who are trying to make a go of this small, struggling restaurant, and they're hoping that the jazz singer Louis Primo will show up and will put them on the map. And it has a very Waiting for Godot kind of feeling to it. And, no spoilers, but it leans into, again, the uncertainty of what is really going to unfold. I think it's just a beautiful, beautiful film. It's one of those films that no matter how many times I see it, I burst into tears. There's a wonderful ending that kind of encompasses the relationship between the brothers and their struggles but their deep, deep love for one another. So highly recommended. Big Night from 1996.
It seems like all of us are, most of us anyway, are recommending stuff that is a little bit from the past. So I've alluded to it already today, but the movie Michael Clayton, which is directed by Tony Gilroy, who is currently doing Andor, the Star Wars offshoot, the Star Wars noir offshoot. I think that Michael Clayton is very close to being a perfect movie. Tom Wilkinson's performance is just mind-bogglingly good and unforgettable. But, Clooney's kind of at his best. My old friend Bill Raymond is in there. And it is really interesting because, for example, and this is not a spoiler at all, but one of the things that Michael Clayton, of either movie, but one of the things that Michael Clayton ultimately does is he gets through a secured death scene, a murder scene that's been taped off, security taped by the cops with all these rules about, how you can't go in there. And he finds a way around it. And Ray Fiennes does exactly the same thing in Conclave. They tape off and they secure the room where the Pope died. And at a certain point, because he has a very pressing need, as did Michael Clayton, he basically just breaks the tape and goes in there like totally illegally. But Michael Clayton really is a tremendous movie. Obviously, Tilda Swinton was nominated, if not a winner of an Oscar for it.
She won.
But she won. Okay. So, I mean, it's a movie I probably watched 5 times. And every time I watch it, there's a little something that I hadn't noticed before. It's just kind of superbly written. And all of the stuff that you see in the Tom Hardy role in MobLand and in the Ray Fiennes role in Conclave, that person whose job it is to wiggle the pin back in the grenade is just very, very excitingly presented there. And in particular, one of the things that has continued to blow my mind, I'm going a little long here just because we wound up with some extra time, but there's a book that Michael Clayton's kid has. I think it's called Realms and Conquest. It's this fantasy book that he's trying to get his dad interested in. And it turns out that a lot of the things in the book are very applicable to certain situations. And one of the other characters does become interested in this book. There's this wonderful scene where Clooney comes in as Michael Clayton, and he realizes his son is on the phone to somebody else, another adult, talking about this book and what it possibly means. It's one of my favorite things ever. All right, so
did you ever hear that allegedly Tony Gilroy started developing that book that the kid is reading first?
Really?
As that movie, and then Michael Clayton was born out of that. That was a rumor that was going around for a while. That it was initially Realms and Conquest was the movie he was going to write, and then Michael Clayton was born out of that.
I can tell that Sean and I are going to start a Michael Clayton podcast where just every week we talk about another aspect of Michael Clayton. So get ready for that. It's an exciting project on our drawing boards. All right. Thanks to this wonderful panel. Just terrific. And thanks to you for listening. We'll be back next week.
Yeah, 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 yeah. On the radio.